That debate by members of parliament, it was a special debate on Eskom, and this was after, of course, Minister Tito Mboweni announced that government will set aside 23 billion rand a year to financially support the embattled utility during its reconfiguration. ENCA's Peladi Situsa has been following the debate and joins us live now from our Cape Town studios. So, Peladi, I suppose let's start with what the Minister Pravin Gordhan had to say. In particular, the details that we are starting to get, about this 23 billion rand a year. Initially yesterday, the impression was that this would be over 3 years. Hence, everyone was talking about it being 69 billion rand. We're actually talking 230 billion rand over 10 years.
That's exactly it, Tulas, and that's one thing that some of the MPs brought up, that this is a debt trap that Eskom is in that we'll actually never be out of. Natasha Mazzoni saying that we're being held at ransom indefinitely by Eskom. So as you said, we initially thought it was just over those 3 years, but it's for the next 10 years that government will initially be giving Eskom this cash injection just to keep going. And there were many analogies thrown about in the National Assembly today, but I think my favorite one was that Eskom is about to hit an iceberg of debt. So the over 400 billion rand debt that the utility has, their MPs were saying that they are about to hit it, we're on the edge, and even this latest bailout that has been granted to them is not going to be enough to save them.
But the Public Enterprises Minister says they've got a plan, don't they, about the reorganization, restructuring of Eskom, but also it includes putting people who will be government's eyes and ears, as it were.
Definitely. So he spoke with quite clear detail, which I think was something people welcomed, pointing to some of the annexures that came with the budget speech yesterday of how exactly this unbundling process is going to roll out, which parts of labor they're going to have to work with to make sure that it all works out. And something that was quite interesting that he said is that there must be it must be a just process. So they're not going to shut down particular sanctions at will or at random. It has to be a gradual process that includes all stakeholders to make sure that this machine can get back on its feet. But again, things like maintenance that have been left in the lurch for years are things that they're going to have to address quite quickly. And unfortunately, that does mean looking at a bloated labor force, for instance, or rather a labor force that isn't proving effective in many of the levels at Eskom.
But opposition parties were not really buying all these plans, all this talk of plans that are in place, and the whole issue around the suspicions around what this unbundling process is really about, and suspicions of privatization being in the pipeline also came to the fore today.
Yes, as suspected, I guess, the EFF were the first to raise that. Nazir Paulson saying that this whole unbundling process, rather, was a coy way, or a sly way, rather, of making sure that the state utility is kept in the hands of a few. So he says Eskom effectively is sabotaging itself. So they say, well, he said, rather, that there was particular concerted efforts to make sure that the utility isn't running at capacity, making sure that the entire citizenry is up in arms about it, and then presenting the sort of privatization model as a savior. Some other MPs also, spoke to that, saying that there are other alternatives that could be considered, which is why they didn't take quite kindly to the minister saying that they were sort of mudslinging in the House today and weren't offering solutions. Many of the MPs who spoke today did come to the plate with their suggestions of renewables, for instance, for rejigging boards, for getting rid of the bloated workforce. So people did come to today's debate prepared with viable solutions. And while Minister Gordhan said that they are willing to listen to some, his rebut about the fact that there weren't any provided proves that maybe he wasn't listening himself.
All right, and in fact, for instance, the NFP's Sheikh Imam, they're talking about a proposal for government to own a 51% stake and the private sector 49%. Finally, Peladi, talk to me about something that I thought was quite startling. When the task team, and I guess the latest of the task teams that were announced into Eskom to sort of help Eskom, the ministerial one was announced, there was an inclusion there of the South African State Security Agency, and a lot of people were sort of taken aback, and the police were also involved in that. Today we're hearing Minister Gordon calling on security agencies to investigate something that he says is sabotage.
Yes, that was quite alarming to us. But again, we'll only know the outcomes of that in a few months, he said. So again, a lot of the task teams that have another complaint by MPs, but as all these task teams are always announced, we never hear of the outcomes. We never know what work they're actually doing. But Minister Gordon today promising that the ones that they are now setting up will have concrete recommendations, outcomes of their various investigations.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Absolutely interesting to hear that the minister talking about the disruption of coal supplies to some of Eskom's power stations in Mpumalanga and the delivery thereof, and calling for the security agencies to get involved. ENCA's Peladi Situsa out in Cape Town. Thank you so much for that update.